All right, all right, all right. This is True Crypto 28, Mr. Anderson from Twitter. Very quick, just gonna do a very short video. Didn't prepare anything, right? So nothing super detailed here. I just wanted to give everyone a quick update, kind of some basic things. I will also say that look, if you're coming here for some specific answers today, I don't really have them, right? Things look pretty decent right here in this spot. That can change pretty quickly, right? So you got one of these 55-45 type scenarios. Why? I'll give you a very quick explanation. Obviously, it's not the most ideal pattern, right? This could easily be now it's getting extended, right? So that's the bear. The bears could say, hey, that is a bear flag, a bear pennant, whatever you like to call it. It's getting pretty long in the tooth here, so that's gives the bulls a little more hope. Bulls did get a 4-hour close or two above this 21. That's good. You wouldn't mind seeing a little bit of cross in the moving averages, which are terribly bearish, right? But the momentum indicators are trying. This guy's trying at the moment. If you look at the higher one really quick, you see the 12-hour also trying. At least it's bull cross to some degree. So you have a little bit of a higher time frame assistance, right? So it would make sense to come and look to sweep these highs. Very quick, you have a range here that was set. You dumped out again. We'll talk a very little bit about how we got here. I'm going to take the whole range, even though, well, let's take this as the range all the way down to the low, just like that. This is the little head fake action when the Fed cut. I like this right here, right? So this, early on, you get this first cross here. The RSI was so low, right, that this is a little dicey. You need your slope better, right? So they were sloping up a little bit, but then finally you do see a lifting. So that's what you want to see. You want to see uh, your moving averages chasing your RSI, but it's getting better. Look, they're all under 50, so there's nothing ideal there. But the formation's coming to life a little bit and trying. What do you not want to see here if you're a bull? If you're a bull, you don't want to see this guy jump back down below because that's obviously a significant warning. It's a little dicey on this time frame. I mean, first of all, any bull move right now is a counter trend, right? So you know you're at risk. You got to always keep that in mind. The other thing is that the volume's fairly terrible. But of course, we're comparing it to what? This nasty, drastic move. And so many people just got destroyed in this particular. I'll probably talk more about that, but they just got destroyed in this market. You could see just an elimination of significant players from BitMEX. The open interest is, I mean, as low as I can remember in a very long time. So anyway, real quick, I will talk something. Let me bring up this chart, right? So I mean, we could kind of talk about what happened because where we left off, right? So the last time we left off, we thought things were pretty nasty when we had dropped down to this particular level here. I usually do a little bit of a review, right? And by the way, if you can like and subscribe, that'd be terrific. If not, it's okay. We'll survive it, but it does help. I will say this though. We had this situation. We dropped out. I'm looking at a 4-hour. We talked about what pressure campaign. I mentioned the fact that look, this thing was under extreme pressure. It could absolutely go significantly lower. At this point, it needed to spring out. There's only one way out, and that's to spring out. And we talked about the fact that you got to take it down to like a low time frame, something crazy like this. I'm actually going to get rid of all these moving averages just for a moment. Something like this on a very low time frame, and you're going to have to see it spring, right? We did a very detailed analysis of this in the last video, so if you want, watch that. And I mentioned that this exact thing, you'll spring up, get on a very low time frame where you get into one of these neutral type scenarios. And then, of course, one of the keys is how well can you hold up during that phase. And there is some bullishness in that. Now, you're still at risk. The fight can only last so long, but you can find some solace in the fact that, hey, this was a very dangerous time. It fought it off. This was very ugly, and it did fight back. And at the moment, it's looking okay on low time frames. It's making an effort. There's been some decent moves in here. I didn't really catch them today. I watched everything like a hawk. I might have had a couple plays, but nothing significant to really talk about. So it just happened to be one of those days where I was looking for something clearer to come into play. It just didn't happen. It's very 50-50, 55-45, and that's just being open and honest about it. I will tell you, if you want to look at something of how this all just fell apart, I have something that's like a cycle analysis, which I can show you. Now, of course, when you're doing that, it's like, hey, I'm looking at this guy's tools. How does that really help me? I'll try to explain a little bit about it. But one thing you can do is you can look at things in cycles and have an understanding that price really does flow. It doesn't really matter what you use. You might use stochastic, you might use RSI, you might use MACD. I use things that I put together myself. But the idea is that it's not This doesn't make it any better, the fact that I'm utilizing this and you might be utilizing something else, but I can still show you pretty clearly. And what the key is this, is that it's color coded, right? So basically it's green. Here's my colors. Green, because you don't know them. So it's green, blue, black, yellow, red, purple, red, in that order, right? So that's the order that you're looking for. And ultimately what happens is, if you normally, in under normal circumstances, wherever you'll go, you'll see that this will be some sort of mishmash. Now, these aren't moving averages or anything like that, so don't try to understand that aspect of it. But if we're looking at price action, if you see a negative slope on all, that's bad enough, right? So obviously the money flow is going that direction. But to get a negative slope and then this uniform nature, which happens right here. You see this says this color formation and slope is death, right? So here at this very moment, you end up getting exactly that scenario, right? It's actually here, right? So you get the yellow, the blue, the black, the green, the blue, the black, the yellow, the red, the purple, the deep dark red right there. And when was that? That's this guy right here. That was roughly 7,600. So you see in these situations, it's not early. I mean, you can go to a lower time frame and find earlier versions of it, but the idea is that it's not that it was early. Obviously, we came down from 10,000. What it's a signal of is, uh-oh. That's the uh-oh signal of this is bad. It needed to escape very quickly. And it just didn't happen. In fact, you get a little bit of a slope on some of these shorter cycles, but then right here, that's the same thing. Once you fell, that's why that arrow's there. Again, you're back in negative slope, right? Perfect uniformity in terms of how the cycles work. This is a large variations of cycles going very far back in time. Things that you wouldn't normally think of. And reality is, here we go. The pressure starts to mount. Now we started here at 76.39. We're here roughly at 73.53, and then boom, you drop down to 5,600, just like that. Well, here you are. You're trying to escape that pressure, and look what happens. You get the signal again at 59.95, again at 57.14. It has to escape this, right? It tried to begin that process here, but green over blue is just very too short of a cycle. It has to really get in there and mash this thing up again to really just try to find some neutrality, right? A neutral position. So ultimately, you get another series of signals, and then boom, again, you went now from that, getting the signal again at 59.95. And then it drops to 43.46. You think, well, can't get any worse than that. Well, guess what? You end up getting one more deep dark drop. Of course, it depends on the exchange that you're on, but this one went down to 35.96. Now you start to see some divergence stick in, right? At this particular situation, you're already seeing some divergence. Went a little bit further down to the 35.96 range on BitMEX. And then finally, it starts to mash it up a little bit, right? You start to see that, pushes on through. Now it's gotten up there a little bit. Of course, it would have been very ugly to fall back through. You could find in that same thing. That's why it says finally escapes. And in that situation, you get into this sideways motion, right? Now, what you see is that you're never close to getting the signal on the opposite end, right? So there's some positive things here. You can find other elements. Trust me, by the way, don't think like, oh, I need this indicator. You don't. Trust me, staring at this will drive you insane also. So you just want to, all you need is what you're learning and focus on that and try to master what you're learning before you jump into something like this that can actually drive you more crazy. But you do get some examples here, obviously, where you can see some order. Just as long as the color flow that we talk about is correct, where you say, all right, all upsloping for a green, blue, black, yellow combination. So it's not giving you the whole rounds, but you got about 4 or 5 of them, and that gives you an advance, which helps. But the idea is, you haven't seen I'll give you an example of what it looks like when you go to the other side. This thing looks like a Van Gogh painting, but I'm sure it won't be too hard to find an example, especially on this time frame. Tries here. Let's see. Now I can already tell this one's a little bit late. Now, the other thing is, the nasty thing about what happened the other day is it kind of just bled into it as opposed to leaping into it. What do I mean by that? You could leap into the cycle where the shorter cycle just burst you into a better situation. So ultimately here, you do see it come into effect in a short term, and it's good enough for $500 move, but it was short-lived, obviously, because it had already sprung so far. You see the same thing occur right there in that very spot, as you guys can see. That's the color that we talk about: green, blue, black, yellow, red, purple, deep dark red, and that was at 7100. And same thing, you get a nice little move, right? So it's not always like, hey, we're just going to go to the moon, but it shows you that you have things going in the right direction. Now, what this means usually, obviously, is these were counters and it was happening, so it just means that you're probably going to hold on. That's the benefit of it, that you'll hold on when you go through that retest, and you can see the formation again. And then, of course, I mentioned you can see this on higher time frames, which is nice. And then this is the one finally where you have a really perfect structure here. You see that? And that is 73.41, and you end up taking this thing all the way up to 8,400 and change on that round. Happens again. You could see it just advance again and again. So if you get that flow, that's what creates it. In this situation, it had already bled down so far, and then to get that signal, and when I say signal, meaning that kind of flow, it's not good. So we don't have to spend too much time on that, but I know people just kind of wonder, like, well, what creates this cascading event? And it really is, a series of elements of momentum, supply. We did speak about that the other day. We talked about this huge resistance that we had, which I won't spend too much time on today, which we call the creek, right? When you have a Wyckoff type of setup where you have an accumulation. This was our creek. It was right there. They call this jumping the creek. When we jumped it, came back, showed that yes, it is support. That's a backup to the edge. Then it starts to run up. Very beautiful run, and then something just started to change, right? Just something started to happen. Didn't exactly have our hands on it, or I didn't, at least not in the beginning. We expected a normal pullback. That's fine. We did anticipate that this needed to hold right there. We drew this out very specifically on Discord, and it was clear that, hey, if this doesn't hold, then we're short, right? Then that changed the bias to a bearish bias where the majority of the trades are going to be down. And by all means, not only did it work to perfection. So that's where the TA can come into play. I would say that, anyone that tells me, hey, your TA told me here that in 4 weeks I'd be here, I'd say, come on, man, you're full of shit. And if you did say that, your TA is probably bad, because the reality is this is a black swan event that turned into a white swan event. What's that mean? You have this shocking event that no one expected that then turned into something that's definitely going to happen. White swan means it is expected, right? So first you get the shock of unexpected, and then you're getting the ongoing shock of like what's going to happen. It's worse and worse and worse and worse, and then being global, people are just really starting to wake up to the idea of like, wow, what does this mean for the global recession, etc. So it is what it is, but you do see that the TA did have you, right, clearly looking to the downside, right? So you were looking mainly for shorts, and just being very open and honest, there was never a situation where you could have seen a legit long on anything higher than a few minute time frame. Now this was dangerous down here. This is where I could see people getting bit. I didn't see personally, for how I trade, any longs here. I wasn't looking for them. I would like it to leap up a little, come down, set a little bit of a higher low, and then kind of go from there. Even this type of formation works a little bit in that circumstance, but it just didn't show it occurring, and then we bled out one more time. But you just never had that situation where there was a legit long there. I mean, ultimately, not until you got really down into this level to where you said, all right, we chopped up for a few hours. Now maybe I can see it, and it popped up. And I'm not saying you should have caught this one either, because the reality is, don't try to catch a bottom. This one, 50-50, as I mentioned. So just getting back to where we're at. Do we try to sweep the highs again? It's going to run out of gas here, right? So it's been putting up the decent fight, but this guy's going to run out of gas, and if it doesn't reclaim this area up here, it needs to try to move and shift up into this level, in my opinion. So if I switch this to like a 4 hour as an example. All right, so here was our range that we set, Here was our range that we set right there. You could see the resistance. So if I'm a bull, I want to see price back living above here at least. I don't know why this is black. Forgive me. Let's make it super bright for you. So just living up here again and just start something in here. And then, of course, you wouldn't want to lose this area again. But if not, it's the other way. We could obviously see it peel back and head back south, right? And I know that doesn't do a lot for you, so I don't mean to give you terrible information. Of course, you would say, all right, well, look, if it's going to hold now that we're progressing a little bit, the first thing you'd want to see is that hold this particular level. If that doesn't hold, and I'll make this bigger so we can see, guys. Now we're dealing on some real low time frame stuff here. But you ideally want this to hold. I mean, technically you could stretch it out, so you have a big target area here, but you would like to see that hold, and if not, you're getting down into the top side here. You did clear this level, and you did get this hold right here as well. So I mean, there's a few layers here. I wouldn't want to lose it. If I lost this level, I would be a little bit concerned. We can also take the range. You could do it a few different ways. You could say, hey, look, I'm taking the range from here to here. And yeah, by this method, certainly I could say life above 4,200 is not so bad, right? I'm okay with that. We can bounce from there. And it is true you can, but it's dicey the way I look at things. I rather one, look at a slightly larger, this was an ugly candle right here. Forgive me. Everything's to the downside. And the same thing, we would say that, look, the majority of trades would be down. You might have a counter in here at the moment until you at least gain this new level, but the majority of the trades are still down. And then I want to see the whole leg because this thing's been ugly. And really, I need to be above this like 5,200 range. Right there at 52.37, we see that. So we were flirting with that a few different times. And really, in my opinion, that makes you dump susceptible. I understand if you said, nah, really 4,900 is where you want to be. I get it. I would look at this level specifically if I was looking at a support and resistance, which is right here, like this better hold. That's a wide range. But if that doesn't hold, man, you're getting into some ugly stuff, scary stuff. Now, for me, I have to pay attention. My wife's going to divorce me. There's so much going on. But the moves to the downside are so much more aggressive in percentage that I don't want to miss them. So the only advice I would give you in reference to this is, one, be very careful. But what I'm doing, even myself, is my position sizes are much smaller because I don't have to have a huge position, right? I think I mentioned this on the last video, but I don't have to have a gigantic position to do well, right? I mean, if you're used to trading $10,000 positions, as an example, and you move 3%, $300, right? If you're used to 100,000, it moves 3%, $3,000. Well, in this situation, you can level down that position dramatically because using 100,000, if it was just 100,000, and I change that to something like 40,000 or 20,000 as an example, well, these moves are 20%, right? So on 20,000, now it's a $4,000 potential profit. But the other side is it's also the possibility of a loss because there's a lot of slippage there, even if you have a stop in place. So you have to be very careful with that. I mean, BitMEX has failed. Whoever you use, I don't know anyone that did super well in it, and if they did, maybe their liquidity isn't so hot anyway. So I shouldn't talk about others because I wasn't on them to know. But I mean, I'm done with BitMEX for the most part. I mean, it was BitMEX. I didn't get caught, thank God, because I wasn't looking for longs. But the one time I was looking for long, and people can vouch for this on Discord and a few friends of mine, but I did finally say, like, oh, okay, this looks good as a long, like literally near the low. And I don't mean like the moment that it hit here, but we were basically dancing in this area, and I wanted to long, and BitMEX screwed me. You don't have to hear my sob story, but basically I'm trying to populate, would not put my order in at all. And the short version of the story is that 20 minutes later, or whatever it was, not only did they not put my order in, thank God I was still watching because I'd actually walked away. They started populating my orders. So God forbid this thing would have tanked. I would have got filled, not even known about it. It's just, I don't know what was going on, but they were not prepared. And obviously, it is what it is. But what you notice is the Nasdaq didn't have anything like that going on, right? That's a real exchange. Ultimately these exchanges, these legit exchanges in the real world, they don't have circumstances where it's taken them 27 minutes to fill 14 orders. I mean, it was just unbelievable the pace. At one point, there was a $500 spread between, it might have been higher, by the way, but I was seeing a spread on the bid and the ask of $500. It was just pure insanity. Every excuse they come out with just doesn't make any sense in terms of how they put it. I know people are saying like, oh, Bitcoin could have went to zero. No, the perp might have went to zero, but that wouldn't have mattered much ultimately. There was a decoupling for a while there between spot and the perps, where you saw, again, like a $500 spread between those two. And certainly if BitMEX is going to take the thing down to near zero, it wouldn't matter. Now, the other thing is there's hidden bids on there, guys, and we have no idea. I'm sure that some people have just insane hidden bids way down low that we wouldn't know about. So I don't buy the story of, anywhere going near zero or anything along those lines. But either way, it's ugly. But getting back to my last point, just be careful, because if it is going to be to the downside, those moves are going to be very sharp. I agree, I need to participate to some degree, but my position will be much smaller in that situation. So as far as saying, hey, I have a decent play for you, I don't. We'll have to go with, hey, the directional bias is to the downside. I have to call it that way because there's a lot of pressure. I'll clear all this to kind of show you what I'm talking about. We see a situation, and I'll cut this video short, as I promised, to where, look, on the very low time frames, we're seeing a very nice, choppy, mishmash situation. You see your 200s here. Don't lose them, man. You start losing them like this, you see what happens on these low time frames, because the pressure's to the downside, as I mentioned. I mean, you'll even see that on the 1 minute several times, where you get these situations. It doesn't look like much, but these are dump outs, right? So it's battling, and then finally you're dumping out under. These are scary situations, right? If you don't bounce off these levels, then you're going to see dramatic level downs. Now, look, obviously that's support, so it held that support well. But I'm just making a point that you have to be leery of such things, and it's not for the inexperienced. This is not that time for the inexperienced. Wait it out, come back later. There's going to be plenty of opportunity to trade Bitcoin. Now, if you have some experience, some chops, hey, it's been quite volatile, and when there's volatility, that's very good. But ultimately, I would say fair assessment, if I'm just thinking of something like dynamics, I don't want to lose this again. I certainly wouldn't want to lose this to the degree where it came down and I see it struggling back with this 5200 range, which you'll see sometimes where, if I don't know if I have my little paintbrush here, if I see price drop, come up, and kind of fail here again, this will have to be a short for me. Win or lose, I don't mind. I'll have to take something like that for sure, because that would worry me. How far it goes, we'll see, right? But again, what I wanted to do, one, make a run at least to sweep this level and see how well you can hold. Keep an eye out if it does do that for the rejection candle and how ugly it is. Is it going to put up something that's ridiculous? If so, then no bueno, right? You would like to see it get up into that range and then start to hammer away if that's the case. Or it could, certainly, we see where this 1 hour is coming in. It's very possible that if you get past this region, to make the leap finally up into this level, begin to start to try to base in here and see what else it has. I don't know what I'm drawing you, so forgive me, but the idea is to at least live in this particular range, and then from there, you have multiple areas here that are a little dicey. So let me just kind of take a quick peek. But this could be a free ride, believe it or not. Ultimately, once you lost this area, there's not a ton here. Now, I'm not going to look back right now because I don't want to extend this particular video, but just not a whole lot going on. So if you can clear this 6,300 range, and that's a big task right there. I'm not saying it should do that or anything along those lines. Well, then you have a chance, obviously, to put yourself into a better situation, and that would look something along those lines, most likely, or an extension in, and then finally bleed back, in which you say, all right, I need this area to hold now because I flipped it. What you want to be concerned about, as I already mentioned, is any peeling back below this level here, or if you do manage to get up in here, forgive me with that. Let me get rid of that. Okay. If you do manage to leap yourself in this range, you want to watch out for the rejection anywhere in here, whether it gives you that nasty fake, or if it just comes in right to this level, and then you see that real ugly rejection candle. A lot of times you'll get one of these rejection candles, even something like that, and then you take out the lows. That's one of your signs of uh-oh, okay, what are we doing? And then it's going to have to at least peel back to where, all right, possibility, by the way, that you could hold this region, because this was a region that it could not get above. So you'll keep an eye out for such things, right? Just go to basic support and resistance type elements and just see, hey, this would be the first stop if that's the case, and that might be more healthy, right? So if I get into a situation where I climb this region, I'm the worst with this paintbrush thing, and I start living in here again, all right, well, maybe it's trying to buy some time, right, and then go and live in this area. And I don't mean straight to this level, but I'm just saying in general, whether it's straight or just pops over, etc. Just a fight here to try to reclaim, because there are multiple areas here. You have your closing base areas, you have your wicks areas, etc., and there's a gap in between. So I could see it trying to get up in there and building some momentum and then going. That might be the way to do it if it was going to do it. Does Bitcoin have it in it? I don't know. I really don't know. The reality is this. The things that have happened, and I'll leave you off with this, is that the QE, all the money they're pouring in, and in this stage, I fully agree with it. It's absolutely necessary. It is absolutely necessary. Throw everything you have at it. I know that's a problem normally, and that's the way we got ourselves in trouble to begin with. But in this situation, it is what it is. You gotta empty the piggy bank, throw money at the circumstances. That's not going to cause a cure to the issue. For that, it's testing, 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 and people being aware and trying to slow this thing down. So obviously, I'm not trying to sidestep the important elements like that. But just from a charting perspective, looking at this, we have to say, look, it's a pressure campaign. It needs to leap out of here to push itself into a better position. But from the fundamental standpoint, Bitcoin is supposedly built for this environment. You couldn't draw it out any better. You couldn't ask for more. Trillions of dollars being put into the system. Much more is coming. I'm telling you guys, they're gonna bail out anyone that needs a bailout. They're gonna bail out. I mean, they've said it already, so it's not like I'm breaking news here. They're certainly gonna look to help the airlines. They'll help Boeing for sure. There's going to be other people that are affected. They're going to help the American citizens. They're probably going to send them money. I still think they'll try to get the tax holiday in at some degree. If I was the president and I wanted to accomplish this, I would be letting the American people know, like, hey, I want to give you money. I want this to happen. I'm sure the Democrats won't fight this, understanding you need money, and kind of go about it that way. They need to open up this element. I hear that the loans process is going pretty slow. I know it's just happening, but they need to open that up, speed up the small business loans. Why they're looking at a plan for businesses that are only 250 and less, I don't know. Extend that, whether it be to 500 or 1,000, because even in that situation, that's not exactly a large business. So why they're trying to assume that those people have the money to do it doesn't make much sense to me. There's things they could put in. They could try to insure businesses against to try to keep workers on, even if they did it for 2 weeks, a month, 3 months, whatever it is. Pour the money into the system. You need to try to weaken the dollar anyway. The rest of the world is weakening their currency, so that's why you see dollar getting stronger at times, and we're losing that war, and it actually is pressure on us in that situation. But it is what it is. Think about it. Some people, China borrows money from you, dollar strengthens, we have to pay them back in the dollar that's now stronger than when they borrowed. It's a benefit for them. So it is what it is. You can get very complicated with those conversations, but that whole long diatribe that I didn't mean to bore you with is the fact that this thing needs to rise from the ashes, in my opinion, right? If it doesn't, look, man, we're way early. I mean, we knew we were early anyway, but in my opinion, and there's not a technical reason for it right now, right? I don't see it. Now, I gave you some scenarios of how you can begin to see that, right? You can start to see this guy dig out, and it's so early. So, I mean, this can happen several weeks down the road or even a couple of months down the road, and it would still be fine. But coming from this environment, and it would make sense that if you tried to get past the pandemic, Bitcoin needs to absolutely thrive. And if it doesn't, I'm sorry, it's not what we think it is, not yet. Not enough people care, right? It shouldn't be that. I understand it, and it's a supply and demand issue. There's a lot of hodlers, and then you get a lot of weak hands. The weak hands need to dump, and that's okay. That's their right to do so, right? They need cash. Let me dump my Bitcoin. But you would think that if Bitcoin is what people think there should be enough people lined up at certainly at this price level. But with the halving coming, that should move to about 6,200. You would think people would front run them now. If there's billionaires saying, hey, I want a piece, well, their order should be there, right? So it's time for this thing to step up and do it. And if not, then it's going to be a longer road, and we're going to wait till the next halving for something along those lines and then say, hey, are you ready then? But in my opinion, we weren't expecting to see, 3 months ago, we didn't think we were going to get this kind of, we said, hey, one day they're going to have a debt crisis and they're going to be more quantitative easing. There's going to be lower rates again, and that's going to help Bitcoin. And no one thought that, hey, it was just a stone throw away, right? This came out of nowhere. It was much more dramatic than people realized. And then ultimately now you're in a situation where if you are what we say you are, it's time to shine. So let's see people put in a bid for this thing. Now, I'm not predicting that at all. I'm going to play my chart, guys. I will play my chart. Right now it's a 50-50 situation, so I don't deserve credit whether this thing goes up or down. On this particular one, we're just having a little conversation. But I'll be watching closely. I'm happy to short it. I'm happy to long it from here. If things change dramatically, and it has to be damn dramatic. Let me give you an example, because we didn't really run through this. I mean, in reality, I need to live here. I mean, this will change over time, right? This is on a 12-hour. It's as time passes, this level will drop. So that's one. Just get a daily in there, same level, so that's good at least. And it comes down every day. It's my 12-hour again. I apologize. All right, so this is pretty decent. So this is falling. If the thing buys time, right? That's why it needs this. This actually works out pretty perfect to what I was explaining, right? So here you are. You need these levels. But the levels will creep down over time, just like you've seen this happen on an hourly, well, a daily and a 12-hour, they will creep down as well. This is like neutral territory, right? Well, ultimately, you could be in a situation to where if you gain this level and you just want to try to survive in here for a while, so be it. This level will move towards you. This level will move towards you a bit, and then you can try to either level up and fight here or just go for it down the road. And maybe that's long down the road, That's fine. You could literally live, forgive me, in a situation to where you go, and I'm trying to paint you like the glorious bullish scenario, right? Because it may obviously get terribly ugly, and we've spoken about that already because there's pressure. So no matter how long this lasts, if you try to build here, so be it. Maybe even lose it temporarily, spring back again, and now try to reclaim one of these areas. That's what this thing needs if it's going to take that step. Now, the interesting thing is, this is a long shot scenario, obviously, right? So I'm not expecting it. But if we're going to see this rise from the ashes type scenario, really you couldn't think of a better time for Bitcoin to like really show itself to the world, because people don't care about Bitcoin. They're not talking about it. We all care about it because we're all interested. We're early adopters, things of that nature. But you see them talking about the stock market, they barely mention it. They show a little thing up on the screen. Bitcoin's up, it's down. It's 2 seconds because there's bigger things going on in the big monstrous, multi-trillion-dollar market. $20 trillion market where Bitcoin's just a tiny little fraction. But the idea is, what kind of announcement would you be making if during this crisis you decoupled finally? Because we've been saying for a long time, like, oh yeah, it's not correlated. I mentioned that recently that, hey, one, I don't care if it's correlated, and I didn't back here. Right now it's bad that it's correlated, but I did say that I do believe it is correlated, and it is absolutely correlated to the stock market. But if you're going to decouple, there would be no better time, because the awareness factor, people would say, wait a second, I'm seeing something different, right? What's happening? Why in this terrible environment is this thing barely affected? And that's what it would look like. Even if you got backed out to this range, you would say, wait a second, this thing's made it through unscathed, right? It started the year. Where was the yearly open? Right, right there. So you're talking about, even if you make it back to around that yearly open, you're like, wait a second, this thing's flat for the year. Well, that would be pretty damn impressive, right? So that's a long ways away. It has to survive a lot of pressure, but it's an interesting side note that we can kind of pay attention to some degree, and have some conversations about, and say, hey, you know what? In my trading, I want to have always a very bullish scenario, a very bearish scenario on hand, so that I'm not a deer in headlights, right? That's the last thing I can have, is this situation happen, and I'm saying, oh my God, what just happened? Now, I'm saying that anyway because that was, it still was a hell of a move, but there's a plan in place to say, all right, well, I know what I'm going to do if this occurs because I saw it occurring, right? So, same thing, we spoke about that on this particular stream over here. Hey, this thing could absolutely crash down. We spoke about the fact that there was like a diagonal in here, and once it fell, it went. We had the creek here. Once it fell, we knew there was lower levels. Those lower levels happened to correspond, like literally that diagonal goes something like this. I can't do it on this time frame. If I clear everything off, it looks something like, and don't hold me to this, if I'm wrong, I apologize, but I believe it's something like this at the moment. Like, let's say like that, where it's kind of holding it at the moment. Again, it lost it clearly, reclaimed before the week's end, and on the weekly scale, what would something like that look like? You level down. Yeah, that's not the way it looks. It looks more like this. Oh, but by the way, why would I do this? I can just show you what it looks like. Okay, that's there to there. That's that diagonal, right, that we've been talking about forever. Like, hey, God forbid you lose this one, right, which was that guy that sparked this push and pump. We talked about it. And now if you look on a daily, it looks different. Now you see already what happened on the weekly. It held. Now it's not good that we're getting rejected here. This is this number that we're talking about getting rejected here again. It's a lot of confluence there. We need to jump that area for sure. If not, going back south. But to switch and look at the daily, it's like, oh, how interesting. We dropped down, you recovered it. On the weekly, it shows as a hold. It's trying to hold that area. It did it again on the daily here again. That same exact level, and we've been speaking about this for months upon months because guess what? We had one of these levels right here. You remember, guys? The guys have been watching this thing. It really was like a smooth one too, the way it lined up, like something like that. And we said, hey, we're gonna eventually find our way to this line. Guess what? We did. And we said if we lose this level, guess what? We're gonna find our way to this line. I didn't know it was gonna be in 9 minutes, right? So don't give me too much credit, but once it happened, so be it. But we did talk about the fact that a lot of times, unfortunately, once it does give way, it gives way in one big swoop, and it is what it is. That's how it works. But I'm out for now. Tomorrow I'll get into some more different elements. I just wanted to kind of say hello. Hopefully you got something beneficial from it. But I'll talk to you guys tomorrow again. If you could like the video, that does help. Share it with others. This is Mr. Anderson signing out. Stay safe.